Welcome to the Black Sky. My name is Piotr Mateusz Bobołowicz, and our guest today is Ambassador Batu Kutelia, Senior Fellow in Foreign Policy Research Institute, former ambassador to the USA, and former head of Georgia's Foreign Intelligence Service, member of the board at the Atlantic Council of Georgia, and professor at the Alte University, Tbilisi and Webster University. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
We are talking 2 days after elections, parliamentary elections in Georgia, the elections that Georgian Dream won, or at least they say they won the election, and but the president, Salome Zurabishvili, didn't recognize the result of this election, saying it was rigged, even calling it a Russian election or a Russian attempt to kidnap the state. What happened? Who won? What is this discrepancy in official and actual results?
Yes, these elections were really very important, and it has been labeled as a breaking point or the crossroad for Georgia, which would determine whether Georgia will go back to the normal democratic transformation and statecraft process or slide down, maybe even irreversibly, to the Russian-style authoritarianism and Russian-style state capture. But to understand the importance of these elections, we have to zoom out and see the dynamics that led up to this election. So since 2012, in Georgia, government was held by Georgian Dream, like big tent political party, largely united not with any ideas, but more under the financial resources of made in Russia oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili. And Ivanishvili and his team and talking heads, they were controlling the government through more unofficial network or informal rule rather than the state institutions. And even most of the state institutions slowly and gradually were under the personal control of Ivanishvili and people loyal to him based on personal loyalties rather than merit or some institutional mandates they have. And it applies to the parliament, judiciary, law enforcement, military, etc. And this process was slowly moving in a way of what we call the state capture. Though rhetorically, Georgian Dream at some point in the beginning during these 12 years were keeping their rhetorics in line with aspirations of Georgian people to be part of EU, European Union, and the Euro-Atlantic community. And they maintained this gray zone where they would maneuver rhetorically, keeping this facade of pro-Westernness, but in reality doing state capture. But after invasion in Ukraine, Russian invasion in Ukraine, this gray zone evaporated. And it was obvious to anybody who did not notice it earlier that Ivanishvili is serving the Russian interests and orchestrating Russian state capture and acting as a Russian proxy in the region. So what was held is a continuation of previous elections, which were also fundamentally rigged, but this last one was a final drop after 12 years in power and well-orchestrated mechanism or well-fine-tuned organized crime operation, which had very little to do with the elections as we call it. Plus, in the lead-up of the elections, there were a lot of information leaked publicly that Ivanishvili was acting on behalf of Russian, under the directions of Russian special services. Voice of America, referring to the U.S. administration, said this. Also, there was reports saying that Russian special services has been infiltrating all the institutional networks or technology networks that are supposed to run the election. So all things considered, and then what happened actually on the day of election, it was a violence, stuffing ballots, intimidation, coercion, disproportional use of administrative resources, and also propaganda operations. We cannot call it an election. Yes, it was a special operation conducted in sync with Russians and Russian infiltration interests, destined, designed, to finalize irreversibly state capture in Georgia. And public did not tolerate, because very high turnout of public allowed us to reveal the nuances of the rigging of election. And angry public yesterday, more than 100,000 demonstrated in Tbilisi, and this public rally was addressed by President, who also referred to it as the rigged elections, and our call to the international communities not to legitimize results of this election. So this is the short story about it.
There is at least one foreign leader who already recognized the result of the elections, and I'm talking about Viktor Orban, who congratulated, even at the night of elections when the results were not yet known. He congratulated the prime minister of Georgia, his victory, but also he visited Georgia. He visited Tbilisi yesterday at the same time that the protests were held in Tbilisi. Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary, of one of the member states of European Union, was having a dinner with Prime Minister of Georgia, who just rigged elections.
Yes, well, I think visit of Orban and his congratulatory moves has been pre-planned even before the elections, and we've been observing that last several years, Georgian government also were trying to position themselves as a best buddies with Orban and playing with this ultra-nationalist, ultra-right ideology. Well, Orban might be that type of political figure with ideology, but with the Georgian dream, I think this is also fake, because you cannot see any ideological thrust behind the GD representatives. Only thing that unites them is a kleptocratic money that they steal from the state, or they make while they launder Russian dirty money, especially after Russia fell under the heavy sanctions because of the invasion in Ukraine. But they seem to be a very comfortable tactical allies. So another foreign leader, for example, who congratulated and also accused U.S. meddling in Georgian affairs is President of Venezuela, Maduro. I expect that some other authoritarians will join this row, but it's not the best or the nicest club Georgia really wants to be, or Georgian people wants to be. That's why we are protesting it. And also Orban, while he was visiting the hotel in Tbilisi, he got quite a harsh reception by the Georgian public. And it's up to Georgian public to decide where Georgia goes, and not one Russian billionaire who is performing some kind of services to Putin.
You said that Georgian public doesn't want to go in this direction. So what are the possible scenarios right now? We've had protests yesterday in Tbilisi. Are there protests still ongoing? Do you think there will be massive protests for days or weeks until the government resigns, or some other scenario?
Well, Georgia is in a very unique position. You barely can name any country, especially in Europe, who's been captured by one oligarch, and also oligarch who is directly controlled by the enemy state, and Russia is an enemy of Georgia. And degree of state capture and the scale of it is unseen of. So, and it's also quite a challenging circumstances for us. So there are many unknowns in this process, how the process will evolve. But certainly the only place where we Georgia citizens can exercise our rights and where space for democracy is left is streets. So that's why yet another time we will resort to the streets, political leaders, civil society, just the citizens. We had this experience already early this spring, 2 months in a row. Hundreds of thousands of Georgians protesting every day because Georgian government, the Georgian Dream government, adopted the foreign agents law, exactly copying the Putin's foreign agents law, which was labeled as a Russian law. Well, while we were protesting it, we got a very solid support from our international partners. So now, as things will evolve again, yes, we will protest attempt of irreversibly capture the state by Russia and their proxies. Unfortunately, our domestic resources won't be enough to revert the processes or take the power from the hands of those who really are not legitimate right now, because they control security services. They resort to the violence very often, and on our side is just a peaceful protest. But we hope that our friends, Western democracies, will give us a very strong shoulder of support, simply because what is happening in Georgia is not only Georgian matter, Georgian domestic politics, or even not Georgian-Russian relations. What is happening in Georgia is a part of a bigger battle between democracy and autocracy. And autocracy, we've seen last several years, decade, been on offensive. They are not only consolidating power within their own countries, but they are stepping beyond their boundaries and interfering within the democratic countries. And Georgia was the first victim of this type of authoritarian aggression, starting in 2008 when Russia invaded militarily Georgia. And after not being able to change our foreign policy course through military means, then they, instead of land capture, they resorted to the state capture. So that's why we view ourselves as a part of this bigger battle and hope that we will have a strong support from the democratic free world, including putting accountable those who are in power and who are responsible for democratic backsliding, violence, seeding polarization in the society, and capturing the state, starting from Ivanishvili and his mafia, or the criminalized pyramid of kleptocrats and thugs.
Do you think Georgian, well, I will call it opposition because it's de facto opposition, even though the right probably should be government right now, a new elected majority. But do you think this opposition, political opposition, will be able to consolidate, to put forward some leaders who will unite Georgians and will lead a political fight against the government?
This is one of the biggest challenge that has been last decade, because, as I said, we had a slowly encroaching and growing authoritarian regime, and it's really hard to have a normal, healthy political life, thus normal political opposition in authoritarian system when all the resources are controlled by the government. They have tools of coercion. Almost every political leader has been in jail or has some criminal or other type of court case hanging on their necks. All the media outlets, opposition media outlets, been financially suffocated or have some type of coercive legal disputes artificially imposed on them by the government and the law enforcement that are controlled by the Ivanishvili. So yes, opposition had a very hard task to exist in generally in Georgia, but also we had a very hard task to consolidate, because it's not about the party politics right now. It's either we will get rid of state capturers or the oligarchic rule, or we will not have a state. So party identity or domestic narrow political ideological agenda is not important. Georgian opposition managed in a last mile of pre-election run unite in 4 different baskets. That was a quite alluring menu to the Georgian electorates, and voter turnout showed that this type of unification really energized and galvanized Georgian public to go to the precincts. This unity will be even more important since we entered in a political crisis, and decision was made that nobody will enter the parliament, not to legitimize GD. So there will be a home alone political party in the parliament, and that will question their legitimacy. Of course, there will be pressure on the opposition trying to split them up or bribe or coerce some of them, but that would be a battle of the nerves. But again, to keep opposition intact and glued together and united in that fight it's important for them to have an external support as well, not legitimizing the government. There have been a very tough statements from United States, from some of the major European country leaders, political leaders, Canada, Sweden, European Union. So I am very optimistic that this type of pressure will finally bear its fruits, and we will have a new elections which will bring to power legitimate government.
One more question. Is there any legal way to stop the fraudulent elections? Maybe president has some power to do it, or some court. Is it still possible to legally stop rigged elections?
As I said in the beginning, the state capture, or this form of state capture that we have, is a most pervasive form of corruption, where state capturer, individual and people affiliated with him, they control every institution, including judiciary, which already has been quite vividly demonstrated to everybody in Georgia and outside, that it's under the thumb of Ivanishvili and his proxies. So therefore, trying to find a legal way out of it, of course, really hard. And the legal casuistics is not the best tool to fight authoritarians. You know that legal whataboutism or legalistic framework of ruling by the law, not rule of law, but ruling by the laws that they design themselves. And the last 12 years, GD was designing the legal system to fit in their own interests, starting from increasing fines, adjusting the judiciary, etc., etc. So I don't see any legal means. There might be a constitutional means to obstruct legitimization of this government. President Salome Zurabishvili can play a role, because presidential institution, though it has a more representative power, still is the only institution that has a legitimacy, and this legitimacy has been reinforced by our international partners who are in touch with her, and her personal engagement in terms of consolidating opposition. That's why it's important. It was important when she called these elections illegitimate yesterday on a very big public rally. But again, if GD wishes to peacefully secede the power, yes, they can find the legalistic ways of doing it. But I think this political crisis can be resolved only through the new election and with the new government. How to go there? Well, there are, this process is now in limbo. There are a lot of unknown moving parts to it. Key for us is to minimize possibility of Russian destructive interference, or them seeding some provocations, which we know and we've seen they tried in other countries in Europe as well, because that might lead to another catastrophe. And here we need, of course, our Western partners to be alerted and give us a hand of support.
Thank you very much. Our guest was Ambassador Batu Kutelia, Senior Fellow in Foreign Policy Research Institute, former ambassador to the USA and former head of Georgia's Foreign Intelligence Service, member of the board at the Atlantic Council of Georgia, and professor at the Alte University in Tbilisi and Webster University. Thank you very much.
Thank you.